Hello and welcome back to School Life Unpacked with me, your host Natasha Curtis-Igho. Today we're diving into the topic that comes up almost every parent in the year before their child starts reception: school readiness. Now, what does the government actually mean by school readiness? Why do we so often only hear about this in the summer term just before children are due to start? And why can it bring so much pressure and understandably a lot of worry for families? In this episode, I want to do three things. I want to unpack what the government expects, explore why it can feel overwhelming for families, offer a more realistic, compassionate perspective for what readiness really looks like. And I'm also going to share some practical tips along the way that you can use at home in everyday life. Let's start with some context. If we look at where does the idea of school readiness come from? So in England, school readiness is shaped by the early years foundation stage framework. You might hear teachers call it the EYFS. This framework says children should have a broad set of skills that prepare them not just for learning but for life. It's really important to say this doesn't mean being able to read fluently or do sums before starting reception. In fact, the Department of Education is very clear that formal academics aren't expected. What's emphasized instead are things like practical independence, communication, social and emotional skills, and readiness to take part in group activities. Over the years, local councils, schools, and even health services have come up with different checklists to help parents think about these skills. And recently, a new school readiness skills checklist has been circulated, which includes things like using cutlery at mealtimes, using the toilet independently, hanging up a coat, talking about feelings, taking turns in sharing, brushing teeth twice a day, recognizing their name, enjoying simple creative activities, and being able to sit and listen for short periods. On paper, these sound simple enough, but if you've spent time with a 4-year-old, you will know that these skills are very much in a work of progress for many children. Why can this feel overwhelming as parents? Well, I think this is where the challenge begins. Often these expectations only land on parents' radar. You might get handed a leaflet at a transition meeting, or a teacher might casually mention it during a home visit, and suddenly you feel like you've only got a few short weeks to get your child ready. That can feel like cramming for an exam, except the exam is your child's future. The pressure is huge. I've spoken with parents who panic because their child still struggles with cutlery, or still has accidents in the toilet, or refuses to put their coat on without a battle. Others worry that their child doesn't recognize letters yet, even though that's not actually an expectation at this stage. And then, of course, there's the issue of comparison. You go on a play date and you see your neighbor's child who is already writing their name neatly, and suddenly you're worrying that your child is falling far behind. That comparison trap is real, and it can make the summer before reception feel more stressful than joyful. So if you think about it, or remember, in every school year, there's almost a 12-month age gap. By this I mean, if you think about a child who is born on the 1st of September, could be nearly a year older than a child born on the 31st of August when they start reception. At age 4, that's enormous. That's the difference between a child who is starting to master independence and routines and a child who still feels very much like a toddler in some ways. And yet both children are considered ready for school because they've reached a starting age. Teachers know this, and they expect a wide range of abilities. If your August-born child is still working on some of these skills, it's not a failure. It's developmentally normal. Before we talk about practical tips, I think it's useful to clear up some myths. School readiness is not about knowing your alphabet from A to Z, writing full sentences, reading storybooks independently, or doing maths worksheets. It's also not about producing a perfectly behaved child who never has a meltdown or refuses to share. Every reception teacher will tell you children are still learning how to manage emotions, how to interact with each other, and how to cope with new environments. What readiness is about is giving children the foundation to thrive when they enter that new environment. How do we support our children with readiness in a way that feels manageable? Okay, so let's think about it. I think things like daily routines, children thrive on reception if you can build small routines around things like putting on shoes, hanging up coats, washing hands before meals. Turn these into games if you can, maybe. Can you beat the timer rather than chores? Things like that might be a good idea. Handy tip for daily routines. But remember, your routine works best for you, and you know your child better than anybody does. So you have to make these practical tips work for you and your child. Independence when eating and toiletering. Practicing these skills in a low pressure setting. At dinner, let them experiment with cutlery, even if it's messy. For toilet independence, gradually stepping back. Maybe first you remind them, then you let them try fully alone with you nearby, and eventually you trust them to manage completely. Emotional language, that's a big one. I think even as adults, sometimes we struggle with the right terminology, but reception classrooms spend a lot of time helping children name and regulate their feelings. You can support this by modeling the language at home. I feel frustrated because the toy isn't working, or you look sad at play because playtime has ended. We've got a wonderful episode on nurturing positive behavior and connections, and Natalie talks about things like that. And here's an amazing snippet from that episode.
Hello, my name is Natalie Toms. I work presently at Southend Council for the early years and child care development team, and I'm an improvement teacher, which means I have the privilege of going into nurseries, preschools, reception classes, and supporting them with good early years practice, encouraging them to think about how to develop their own practice and empower them to do so. And I think we don't realise how, for our little ones, it's possibly even more intense because they're not aware of what these feelings are, what these emotions are. They're still learning and developing. And I think that's his way of explaining it. So you have your upstairs thinking brain and your downstairs brain. And the idea is that if you flip your lid, it's about helping. Our job is to help the children be calm enough so that we can then put that lid back on, get their thinking brain back engaged. And then that means that we can then hopefully, when they're calm, address the behaviour and see if we can help support them going forward with what they might do on another occasion.
Giving us the opportunity to help our children by perhaps modelling language and how that is so important for children, because they may not have the terminology, and we have to encourage them by using the terminology so that they understand it and they can see that it's okay for mummy and daddy or nanny or granddad or whoever their significant carer is able to also express their emotions so that they can feel safe to express their emotions with you. Playdates and taking turns. I always think this is tricky because there's always kids who find sharing slightly easier than others. And so I think it's really important that we encourage our children to practice taking turns. And this can be done by playing with our kids, your turn, then my turn, or board games, things like that. Group activities are great, and just helping them understand that sometimes it's not their turn, but it's okay to wait, I think is important. I think that's what I've noticed with my kids. Encouraging the sharing and not worrying too much if it doesn't work out. Every parent has a different strategy, so please let me know what yours are, because I'm always interested to learn. And encouraging our children to sit down and pay attention and listen for short amounts of times is a wonderful thing to help build upon at home in readiness for school. Reading a book together, sat down snuggled, or playing a short little game, just to try and increase their ability to pay attention really helps them when they get to reception, when they have to sit on the carpet listening to stories, or when they have phonics sessions. So I feel like it's a really important skill that we as parents can help build upon with them. As they develop, you see them being able to do it for longer and longer, and school helps them as well with that. I think it's one not to worry too much about because it does take time. I remember taking my son to somewhere where we had to do what's in the box, and you could see the excitement on these little toddlers to wait to see what's in the box, and it was taking all their strength to just wait, and you knew that there was going to be one who ran to the box straight away, and there was one kid who was like, I'm in the box, I need to know what's in the box. But that's exciting because you sort of see how kids get that excited to know what's going to happen next, but it also helps build their attention and listening to see if they can hold out a tiny microsecond longer. One parent told me her son simply refused to put on his coat every morning. It turned into a battle. The breaking through came when she turned it into a silly race. So this is one of those things where people tell you these amazing stories of how they've overcome little challenges with their kids, and I wanted to share that because I think it's really fun, the idea that we don't want to fight our children every morning, so let's make it fun. Let's see if you can get your coat on before I count to 10. So this was her example that she gave me. She was like, he was so motivated because now he had a goal. He was going to beat mummy counting to 10 to get his coat on. Stories and reflections. Let me give you a couple of examples of what parents have commented on when we've been talking about our kids and things that they've done, and moments where they've managed to take something tricky and make it more fun, so they've overcome like little challenges that feel quite massive, but when you reflect back have been problem solved amazingly. I had another mum tell me that she was worried because her daughter wasn't recognizing letters, but what her daughter loved was drawing. So by encouraging her art, she naturally started writing the first letter of her name without realizing it. That's readiness too, because you're following your child's interest and letting the skill develop in context. So these stories kind of remind us that readiness doesn't always come through drills and pressure. It often comes through play and creativity and gentle encouragement. Working with schools. Finally, remember that teachers expect children to arrive at reception with a huge range of abilities. Some children will run in confidently and hang up their coat straight away, while others will cling to their parents and need help with the toilet on day one. But both are normal. Readiness isn't about sending in a finished product. It's about preparing children to keep growing with the support of their teachers and their families. So if there are skills your child is still working on, talk to the school. Teachers can put things in place, maybe extra reminders for the toilet, maybe visual cues for hanging up coats, maybe a buddy system for finding belongings. They're there to help our children be the best little people that they can be and to support us. So we should always remember that. So to sum up everything we've kind of talked about, like the government does have a checklist of what they feel school readiness looks like, and it highlights independence, communication, and social skills. But that does look different with every single child you will meet. And if we look at this massive age gap that happens with kids when they start reception, I think it allows for a bit of grace and compassion with allowing kids to develop in their own time and giving them a little bit of time to get there, because it isn't a one shoe fits all kind of scenario. Our children are these amazing individuals and they're all unique, and how they communicate with us, how they show their independence, how they display their social skills, it takes time. And we have to give them that time. And we have to give ourselves as parents a bit of grace, because we're preparing them. And all we can do is prepare them as best we can and keep supporting them and encouraging them. And that's something I think parents is a massive job. And so don't be too hard on yourself if you get this list, or you had this list at the beginning of summer and now we're a week before children start reception and you're thinking, baby Joe isn't there, he's not there. He's probably exactly where he needs to be, and his reception teachers are going to be amazing and they're going to be supportive, and you have nothing to worry about. Our teachers are experts. They know how to put things in place that will help encourage, nurture, and build upon these skills that our children need during their first year in reception. Our role as parents really is to gently support our children and give them opportunities to practice independence, and remember that confidence, curiosity, those all matter so much more than being able to zip up your coat or recognize your name. They'll get there. We shouldn't worry too much. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of School Life Unpacked. If you would like to share your stories or get in touch, you can always reach me on social media, Instagram, TikTok, or send me an email. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join us again for another episode of School Life Unpacked. Thank you.